Alright, this is our second video on the Cold War, number 10. This is 10B. This is Reagan and the ultimate end of the Soviet Union. Good stuff here. Now, Ronald Reagan kind of breaks the mold of Ford and Nixon and Carter, and famously he refers to the Soviet Union as the evil empire. And I can't support an evil empire. So he's going to ratchet up this. He's going to build up nuclear arsenals again. He's going to do all this. His crown jewel was referred to as the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI. Now, Pete, what it said was we were going to put lasers up in space, and we were going to be able to control these lasers and blow up ballistic missiles if they were launched. People who saw this said, "Oh my gosh, George Lucas was right." And they call this Star Wars, because Star Wars has lasers. And so they nicknamed it Star Wars. It was fun. It was very costly, and we're still feeling kind of the effect of this. Luckily, it was never had to be used, so that's a good note, right? Now, when Reagan also comes, we get our last really big leader of the Soviet Union. His name was Mikhail Gorbachev, or Gorbachev. He is kind of the most laid-back and liberal leader of the Soviet Union, and unfortunately for him, he was born with that very recognizable birthmark on his forehead, which was poked fun of in the U.S. military a ton. Now, he does institute some new reforms. The first is called Glasnost. Now, Glasnost is an openness, is what it means, and it's a sharing of ideas. And so, if we had something, we shared it with them, and so the people are able to start doing this and able to see the good that exists in capitalism, if you will. The other one, and the big one, is called Perestroika. Perestroika means restructuring. He actually allowed the businesses to be privately owned, to begin to make money, to work for things like that. And so once you involve money in private owned, communism is just a stone's throw away from ending. Now, one of our last missile treaties, right? Seems like we have a ton, right? It's called the INF. INF Treaty stands for Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. We're going to try to get rid of these smaller ballistic missiles that could be launched not intercontinentally through space, but at very close range. And again, we're trying to bring down these potential risks. Now, Reagan does something ultimately like Kennedy. Kennedy famously went to the Berlin Wall in 1961 and gave his Eis und ein Berliner speech, where he's trying to say, "I'm a Berliner," and ended up saying, "I'm a jelly donut." Anyway, Reagan, sensing Gorbachev is changing things, goes to the Brandenburg Gate, which was Checkpoint Charlie, the key point in the wall where people were at one time moving through, and said, "Mr. Gorbachev, if you want real peace, tear down this wall." It was a highly climactic moment. Did Gorbachev tear down the wall? No, but the seed is planted. This was made in 87, I believe. Yeah. The wall will ultimately come down, not by governments, not by anything of that, but by the people themselves, and by a fluke. Early in 1989, the day the wall came down, cars were able to go across into West Berlin from East Berlin, and vice versa, for a short time due to miscommunication. When they closed it up again, the people said, no, we've enjoyed this so much. And so they take to the streets, they take to the wall, and with bare hands and pickaxes, they start tearing away at that wall. And there's a very famous scene of someone being blasted with a water cannon from the other side, and ultimately the Soviet Union steps in and they start to dismantle the wall and pull it apart. Now, you can purchase on eBay today some pieces of the wall, and that's what happened there. One man is trying to reconstruct it piece by piece. Why? I have no idea. It was a symbol of oppression. And if we have anything that we learned from the Cold War, or from a wall in general, walls, when you put them up, show you dislike and you hate the people on the other side of it. It is disdain, it is hatred, it is oppression. It is not a good thing. So, this wall finally coming down after 28 years was a major, major factor in what happens next. Now, there's one country that never really fell under this. They were socialist, and it was a united Yugoslav. Now, Slavic people are an ethnicity, okay? Yugo meaning all. So all Slavic-speaking people were together in a country called Yugoslavia. They did have a dictator. He was simply called Tito. And Tito was actually supported by the United States as a way to show that we could cooperate together. Now, when he passes away, there's a major big battle in 1990, and we'll get into that, and that's very chaotic with Clinton. Now, once the wall comes down, little by little, these Soviet Socialist republics begin declaring independence. We have Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania and Belarus and Moldavia and Ukraine and Georgia and Armenia and Azerbaijan and Turkmen and Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, etc. They begin to start declaring independence. Now, when they do this, these satellite nations are looking at each other going, well, can we do that, etc. And then we run into our last kind of remnant of the Cold War and moving into that, and that is, as the WHO called him, Boris the Spider. Boris Yeltsin is going to be kind of the last Soviet Union leader, and he's also the first president of what is called the Russian Federation. This is the same concept they operate today, and this is their new flag. They've nixed the all-red hammer and sickle in virtue of a more traditional tricolor like they had for many, many years. Sometimes you'll see this with an eagle in the middle, but that's it. That's the end of the Cold War. So the Cold War started in 1945, and it goes all the way until 1991, almost 50 years. And we have two proxy wars in Korea and Vietnam, and all the other chaos that ensues. Now, the next series of videos, guys, I'm going to go back through the decades, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. Domestically, and not talking about the Cold War, but everything else that was happening mainly here. Then we have the civil rights, and then lastly we have the 1980s to current. So I put the Cold War together so you understand that Vietnam and Korea and all these things are part of the Cold War. It helps you to understand that, all right? So that is it for the Cold War videos.